You know, I heard Dr. King or Robert Kennedy or Barbara Jordan or John Lennon or Marvin Gaye with my own ears. How did I get so lost thinking if I just bought more junk, I'd be happy? And they're coming, thousands of them a day, coming to the nonprofit saying, make me whole, use me. This is the deepest well of life experience in the history of the world. No other generation, freest, richest, most educated generation ever going to live longer than any generation ever. So again, think about this. Candidates fighting for your vote, talking about a state with a $9 billion hole, yet they're not talking about a sector that represents 10% of the economy, 17% of the workforce, but more importantly is a conduit for all that idealism, all that energy, all those new ideas. That's power. And we can't cross our fingers anymore and hope somebody gets elected who sees us. You know, who hopes someone gets elected who doesn't make cuts based on an anecdotal understanding of what we do, but is brave enough to challenge us to be the nonprofit sector we were born to be, to really move beyond the traditional and respectful service culture into the empowerment culture, to in effect to still keep the domestic violence shelters strong, but to give women a way out of those shelters. But I'll tell you, the best example I can think of right now, and it speaks to this, is the work of Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Peace Prize 2 years ago for his work with the Grameen Bank. Now, Muhammad Yunus was an American-trained economist, but he's from Bangladesh. And just as you love Westchester County and New York, and I love D.C., and we all love America, he loves Bangladesh. You know, and he was visiting, and he was in a remote rural village when he met a group of women who were lamenting the fact that they were all but indentured to moneylenders. And he asked, what would it take for you all to be free? And they went over, they huddled, counted, came back, said $27. Now, like most people, he had $27 in his pocket. And for a moment, legend has it, he reached in and considered giving it to him. But unfortunately, he's an economist. You know, most of us would get a picture taken, Facebook page, I liberated a village, life is good. What'd you do on your vacation, you know? But Yunus said, in effect, I could give you the money, but I know in my heart I'm only buying you a moment's respite. That ultimately, because I haven't changed the economy, you're going to fall back into the hands of the moneylenders eventually. But he said, you know what? I've traveled the world and I don't see any evidence that the entrepreneurial spirit only beats in the heart of a man. So my sisters, I'll tell you what. I will loan you this money. You start a business. You pay the moneylender back. You pay me back. You're free. And that was the birth of the Grameen Bank. And Muhammad Yunus has elevated the better part of 70 million women, primarily women, out of poverty with small loans, micro loans. Now the reality is in 1986, when Bill Gates launched and Microsoft went public, if any of you all in this room, anybody in this room had given $1,000 when Microsoft went public, you'd have $500,000 in the bank today. But if you invested $1,000 in the DC Central Kitchen, or Grayston Bakery, another one of my favorite programs down in Yonkers, or the Grameen Bank, all you were eligible for was a one-time tax deduction because you gave to charity. Now, why not an annual tax deduction with increasing value based on the same rate of return principle as a dividend check? If an organization can show verifiable, measurable economic return on investment, imagine what that would do for these communities in a time of tough economic times. Instead of cutting services, imagine the power of helping those women out of the domestic violence shelter to open new businesses, pay taxes, break the cycle with their families, increase tax revenue. Why don't we incentivize that kind of giving? This is the kind of flip that we need to see, because right now what we have, and imagine the folly of telling an entire generation raised doing service on graduation day. I know this because I'm going to be a commencement speaker, and luckily I get to do this almost every single year. In fact, didn't go to college. This will be, I'm going to say I'll be Dr. Egger this year. God bless America. Feed the poor, get to be a doctor. But I'll tell you what, every single year, you know what happens on graduation day? We say to an entire generation, congratulations. You now are coming out of one of the great educational systems in the history of the world. But today you must decide, do you want to make money or do you want to do good deeds? Do you want to be a .com or do you want to be a .org? And I pray, and I'll work to the day I die to help a generation and help all America realize you don't have to choose. You don't have to choose. In fact, the future is going to be the hybrid. The future is both together. And that's what a great outreach coordinator will help local government understand. But that's what we're going to have to work for. But it's going to take the one thing we haven't tried, brothers and sisters, and that's standing together. It's letting go of the folly notion that somehow we're too diverse to find common ground. I'm going to give you 3 things, and then I'm going to shut up and move on to question and answers. Because I know, I got to tell you, I've made payroll for 23 years. I've run the United Way. I don't know how many brave things I've done, but standing between you all and lunch has got to be one of the top brave things I've ever done in my life. So we're going to move this fast, but there's 3 big canards that people think nonprofits, we don't have. What does the university, and the food bank have in common? Well, I'll tell you, there's 3 things. Number 1, and it was great because we did have some of our brothers and sisters in the Fourth Estate here this morning, but there should be media coverage of this event. In fact, there should be daily media coverage of our work in every single media outlet in America. The notion that you can open any paper on any given morning and have somebody say good restaurant, bad restaurant, good movie, bad movie, yet nothing about a sector that represents 10% of the economy. What's a great investment? How do I determine what a great nonprofit is to invest in, to go to work for, or to volunteer at? But secondly, that notion, without that coverage, what's left in this vacuum is this amazing intellectual albatross around our neck that the best nonprofit. You walk up to Albany, and you walk and you find the 10 smartest looking people in Albany. And that could be a hunt, but you look and you find them. And you ask them, what's a good nonprofit? Tell me, how do you determine a great nonprofit? 7 wouldn't look like they know. 2 look like they know but be afraid they'd be wrong. 1 would say, oh, it's simple. It's the one with the lowest administrative overhead. Again, think about this. The nonprofit sector in America is the economic equivalent of India. I say this every speech. If we were a country, the nonprofit sector in America most likely would have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. Yet we don't have a say in the smallest town's budget process. And the people who make decisions about which nonprofits get grant funding and whatnot base it on the notion of who's got the lowest administrative overhead. But that brings us to the 3rd thing we all have in common, and that's legislation. And whether it's property taxes, whether it's donor-advised funds, or whether it's just cuts that are breaking the hearts of the average legislature, who just thinks if I get a choice between a dry cleaner and a domestic violence shelter, I'm going to have to choose the dry cleaner because that's a business. This flawed way of thinking is crippling us, and we have to stand together to make sure people have the information they need about our economic impact, the amount of money we bring in, the jobs we create, but also we have to forward legislation. We have to help them see that with a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of bravery and a little bit of vision and a whole lot of leadership, New York, which has led thousands of different ways and thousands of different times, can lead again. Thank you all very, very much.
Okay, if you have a microphone, I need you to raise your microphone up high. And if you have a question, I'd like to see your hand, please. Don't be shy. The first question's always the hardest.
And don't ask when's lunch.
It's coming now. It's coming now. All right, question. Back there, please get the mic.
I got big ears.
No, but they don't have.
Can you comment a little bit more about the collaborations, the kitchen collaborations with the universities?
Certainly. In fact, if anybody's interested, it's Campus Kitchens. It's on our website. We're open source, although Campus Kitchens, in fact, Maureen, where is Maureen? I know she's here some. Oh, there's Maureen. Maureen is the director of Campus Kitchens. She's up here with me today. She's been working the SUNY system really hard to open more. But again, the idea is very simple. How can we take the food that's not only thrown away on campus, but partner with the food bank? You've got students that are doing community gardens. There's so many different ways these are, again, fundamentally changing the idea of service. But at its core, it takes the idea, and this is very much what I'm interested in. I refer to it as the Costanza principle. It's like that episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza just does the opposite. I tell you, brother, sister, Muhammad Yunus, when he started his bank, he said, I'm going to do everything the opposite of a bank. Banks only loan to men, I'll loan to women. Banks only loan to people with collateral, I'll loan, and on and on and on. The same thing, I got to be honest, when I started the kitchen, I was going to do the opposite. Nonprofits didn't make money, I was going to make money. Nonprofits didn't market, I was going to market. And again, it wasn't going to be, look at me, it was look at this. Nonprofits weren't political, you bet I was going to be political. And by the way, of all the things I've done, forming the Nonprofit Congress, and I have been open, and I have been, at times, extremely loud about my opinions, never once has anybody threatened to take away my 501c3. Never once has anybody challenged. And so that notion that we can't do this, abandon all that. The state association here will help you do that. There's an amazing state association here in New York that I urge you to be members of. But anyway, Maureen will help you up, and anybody with campus kitchens or our website is full of information.
Right there, Beth.
Hi, thank you so much for speaking to us. I'm with the Junior League of Bergen County, and and it's a completely volunteer-run organization. I wanted to know, how can these nonprofits use their volunteers to help change mindset and legislation?
Well, I'll tell you, that is a powerful question because, to be honest with you, not only do we have huge voting power here, because you represent 1.7 million votes, but our volunteers, and quite frankly, the men and women we serve. There's an army of people who donate, work at, or volunteer in nonprofits. And I think that while we have to be, at times, and I think for most people in this room, very, very cognizant of the limits of what you can do in the political process. You can do anything really up into actually endorsing candidates. I think we should do everything in our power. And here's a classic example. Just in Dallas last week, or 2 weeks ago, they had a candidates forum for the mayor's race, right? My opinion, no one should be elected from now on who doesn't have a vision that includes the sector. And that means us letting go temporarily the idea of our specific issue. It's that every time we have candidates forums, it's usually either the environmental groups, the arts groups, or human services groups. And what we have to do is learn to stand together, you know, and really force candidates to say, in effect, I have a vision that includes you all. No candidate, quite frankly, would come before the Chamber of Commerce and not have a plan. In fact, they wouldn't be considered a viable candidate if they did. And I think we need to do the same thing and then make sure our volunteers understand this. Now, to be honest with you, a thing I just put us along while we're talking volunteerism is we have a volunteer bill of rights posted in the DC Central Kitchen. And the idea of saying to volunteers, you have the right to know what impact your work made in the community. I'll be honest with you, I want people to ask, because then it gives us a chance to really open this door to talk about the economic impact and really elevate this idea that far from just good deeds, we're an essential part of this. And so that's a way to get into their heads a little bit without really, you know, going the whole political route. But I'll be honest with you, I've really been toying with the idea of a Emily's List for nonprofits. In effect, you know, an organization that would raise money specifically to help candidates who have a plan get elected. Because fundamentally, that's what we have to do. We have to elect a new generation of people who aren't burdened by the notion of .com, .org, but see us as an amazing part of the economy.
Question? Yeah, way over there.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much. So many thoughts are provoked. I'd love to hear more from you. I'd like your comments on this. We hear so much about the defunding of not-for-profits because of the fiscal constraints we're faced with. But to me, the more serious consideration is what I see as an ideological shift away from the idea that government should be supporting what we call safety net services. And I think that that would be happening right now, even in the absence of fiscal constraints. So I'd love to hear your comments on that.
Well, I agree. And this is, again, I got to be honest with you, I've thought this through. I'm very lucky. You know, there's three kinds of leaders, basically, in our sector. There's the bulk of this leadership is focused on the immediacy of now. And it's real. How do I make payroll? How do I feed the people who are lining up outside our doors? That's real. But then you have the second group that looks up and has that moment, and I'm one of them who has that moment. And again, you all are here today. This moment to think, to look up above the din of every day and see this bigger picture. Now, many people, quite frankly, when they see what's happening, put their head back down real quick. But a small group, and I hope that you all will join this, march out to meet the future. And in fact, we can wait for more of this to happen, and if we wait, more will come. Because anytime you have a society, there's 80 million people getting old. So what you have is an economic equation in which the number of people consuming outnumber the number of people producing for a little bit. And that always causes friction. And frankly, it often has very ugly emotions to rise up. And we're going to have to go out and be part of this. We can't just hope that, again, things happen. But this is one of the things, and by the way, if you want, I will be leading a session that will probably pick up where this left off. And I certainly don't want to rob anybody else's next session. But again, we're going to talk a lot about the generation that's coming and how together we will redefine not just philanthropy, but I think, quite frankly, commerce in America. Because the future, by the way, the future of philanthropy is going to be how you spend your money every single day, not the check at the end of the year. But I'll see you all at the next session. Thank you all. It's an honor. I love this state. I love this state, and it's an honor to be here with you all today.